APFN Hour is an irregular sharing and knowledge event, and we're going to host more of them. And if you have any ideas what we should discuss in the region here, please let us know. And I will, of course, improve on communicating with Dr. Anissa, because sometimes we want to, of course, collaborate with the Committee of Practice of the Journal of Future Studies, as well as with the APF. Also welcome to our chair, Sherman Cruz, who is also on the working committee of the Asia-Pacific Futures Network. So I think I talked enough and more people have joined. I hand over to Colin to frame our session.
Thanks very much, Joost. Wonderful to be here, and thanks to everyone for joining us. I'll just share my screen now. Okay, so you can see that clearly, Joost?
Yes.
Excellent. So my name is Dr. Colin Russo, an Australian futurist, and today I'm presenting on the future of ChatGPT and implications for the Asia-Pacific region from the viewpoint of the first litany layer of CLA. Now, Professor Sohail Inayatullah created the futures methodology of causal layered analysis, a method of organisational, social and civilisational change, guiding transformational learning about the present and the future through deconstructing and reconstructing reality at 4 levels. Each of our presenters today are speaking to one of those levels. I'll present the litany of day-to-day unquestioned views of reality we may see in news headlines. Nok will present the systems layer, which offers integrations and deep structural causes and systemic factors that underlie social and cultural phenomena. Luke Tay will present the worldview stakeholder perspectives. And then Dr. Marcus Anthony will present the myth-metaphor layer of deepest, often unconscious, myths and metaphors. Cheryl Chung will then present the impact of ChatGPT on the Asia-Pacific region. And the UNESCO Chair of Future Studies, Professor Sohail Inayatullah himself, will share a synthesis of the 5 presentations. So ChatGPT, it's changed absolutely everything. As the calculator disrupted the maths class, we were told not to come to class without it in the 70s. We had to learn to use the calculator because we had to use it in the workplace. Now ChatGPT is disrupting the English class and the workplace. It's the biggest change in digital technology since the iPhone. It's the official coming of age of artificial intelligence. And ChatGPT, the app, took only 2 months to gain 100 million users. Now, by comparison, Facebook took 4.5 years, Netflix took 10 years. ChatGPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, which is a type of artificial intelligence language developed by OpenAI. And Microsoft has just given $10 billion to the developers to generate additional integrated services. So it has the ability to generate contextually relevant, fluent and creative text. And it's like having, for example, Barack Obama or Robin Williams live in your PC. So its applications are so wide-ranging, I asked AI to generate an image of itself in the future. And it generated this image on the right here of the screen, the vulnerable, humanized, fresh face, and also the industrialized complex. So in terms of the litany of ChatGPT, it has the potential to make a significant impact on future industry in the Asia-Pacific region. Firstly, its natural language processing capabilities can help improve communication and automate many of the tedious tasks that we find in various industries, including, say, customer service, healthcare, and finance. But it also has the ability to process and analyze vast amounts of data and can help businesses in the region to make better decisions and gain new insights. Through constant learning and improvement, coupled with the increasing adoption of artificial intelligence in the Asia-Pacific region, it will mean that ChatGPT can play a role in the development and advancement of industries, leading to new innovations, products, and services. Now, I generated a quick ChatGPT poem. ChatGPT has come with the power untold, a tool that can answer questions young and old. It works with speed and precision day and night, replacing human labour with its digital might. It can do the jobs we once thought were unique, from customer service to finance and data leak. And though its skills are vast and its knowledge immense, it may leave some workers with no defence. So it has these positives and negatives. And so if these media headlines clarify some of those issues and impacts of ChatGPT since November 22, when it was introduced, so only a few months ago. Firstly, the ChatGPT bot channels history to pen State of the Union speech. ChatGPT has been programmed to write the State of the Union speech by using past speeches and past public opinion data. Secondly, the promises, pitfalls and panic. The use of AI language models like ChatGPT raises excitement, but also concern about the impact of AI on society, including issues around ethics and bias. Thirdly, in the news, Google is to release its chatbot after ChatGPT's success, and now Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and others plan to release their own chatbots using similar language processing techniques. So the fourth article I picked up there was the legal loser, which is that what ChatGPT means for lawyers. It's about the ability to generate human-like text, which then has, and that's on ChatGPT, so that then has IP or intellectual property implications for the legal industry. But it also raises concerns about job displacement and how the legal industry will manage those displacements. Fifthly, ChatGPT may already be used in cyber attacks. So the rise of AI language models like ChatGPT also presents a new threat in the form of text-based cyber attacks, as these models generate convincing but false messages that may be used to deceive people. So it's only right that society is cautious, as these three articles show. They clarify fears and hopes for its use in the education sector. The first article on the left-hand side there, Queensland public schools ban students using ChatGPT. And a Charles Darwin University AI expert argues against placing a blanket ban on AI, stating that it's an obsolete and unsuitable way of thinking about education. That expert believes that AI is a tool that should be used to our advantage and presents an opportunity to rethink education and assessments. The second author is for regulating ChatGPT. Very interesting, because that author is OpenAI's own Chief Technology Officer, Mira Murati, and she is the inventor of ChatGPT. And so what she's saying is kind of like a disclaimer, and it says that we're not ready yet for ChatGPT's impact, and it will make it extremely difficult to assess and detect competence, leading to potential immoral and incorrect outcomes. So there's concern that people may become less capable, and we need to transition carefully. The third author there takes a co-creative view. His name's Brett Weinstein, and he argues towards AI being taking a middle of the road approach, where AI should be used wisely to perform jobs that we just don't want to do as human beings. So this litany of views for and against ChatGPT could lead to scenarios of its decline or advancement. Scenario one, the decline of ChatGPT, describes it falling down or being overregulated to become just a simple browser that redistributes information. So if we overregulate it, we'll go backwards. It'll just be like a normal browser. Scenario two explores the complex impact of AI on employment, noting that while some jobs may be automated, others may be enhanced or redefined, and new jobs may be created from it. But there's also a 2.1 scenario, and I'll cover that later, which is more a maladaptive dystopian scenario. Scenario three highlights ChatGPT's potential for entertainment and productivity, as it can entertain with jokes and insights and even make dull moments more productive. Now, scenario four presents a vision of a brighter future where ChatGPT plays a key role in solving global challenges, such as exploring the cosmos, curing diseases, tackling climate change, ending hunger and poverty, and bringing education to every corner of the world. But that scenario 2.1 really does need a bit of a look at, because if we consider its fullness, a futuristically advanced ChatGPT may in fact result in some negatives or positives, depending on which way you look at it. And that is that we incorporate more complex feedback loops into ChatGPT. Secondly, we combine language models with other types of AI, such as embedding ChatGPT into robots, which Tesla now wants to do. Thirdly, we implement more dynamic memory structures into ChatGPT, so it's able to store and retrieve information in a way that's more similar to the hierarchical organization of the human brain, with much more power, of course, because it can expand that long-term thinking. Fourthly, we develop models that can explicitly encode the context and emotional valence of memories to generate more nuanced and contextually appropriate responses. But the fear of all of this with a robot, say, with ChatGPT capabilities, long-term memory like the brain, but also a sensory robot, is that it's also on the internet. It's also on the web. And so the fear is of a global mind mapping and trend predictability that could emerge from this kind of maladaptive scenario. The preferred future is simply improved critical reasoning skills generates realistic strategies. So it's crucial to ensure the accuracy and reliability of the information generated by ChatGPT as we consider its ethical and legal implications. I'll hand back to the discussion of the systems layer.
Yeah, thanks very much, Colin. I think I should have asked ChatGPT to be the timekeeper. It's not easy, I know. Thanks very much for this introduction, Colin, on the litany level. We are going straight to the system level, and I would like to hand over to Nok. Nok is a PhD candidate at the Chiang Mai University, and I think very soon to be Dr. Nok. I think it can be only a few weeks. And I'm sure you didn't use ChatGPT for that, but you were going to tell us something about system integration. Over to you, Nok.
Thank you, Joost. Thank you, Dr. Colin, for the overview of ChatGPT and the scenario in 2033. My name is Nok Boonmavichit. I'm going to be talking about the system integration, and it will include the integration in the web search, Microsoft, and its new search experience by Bing, the current application of AI and future integration of creative work. And then I will end with the ethical concern. So first, let's take a step back to look at ChatGPT and why I use Microsoft and Bing to talk about it, because Satya Nadella had mentioned about the 3 stages of the web: the birth on the PC and server, second stage is on the mobile and apps, and now the transformation by AI. He had made a comment that the search has not changed in the past 20 years. There are 10 billion queries a day, but 40% of them fail because users cannot find what they're looking for. And Bing with ChatGPT will offer this better experience. How does it do it? There are 3 types of search right now: navigation, information, and everything else. And it's the everything else that ChatGPT will fill in. Microsoft finds the sweet spots to combine generative AI and search together and put the Bing right there. Bing will offer not only search, but also answer us with information, chat with us, and hearing our feedback, and also create something with us. So we can order ChatGPT to write a song from Barack Obama to Putin in Taylor Swift style, and it can do that within minutes of the query. Google is trying to catch up by launching Bard, but right now it doesn't look like it can catch up that quickly. Microsoft is integrating ChatGPT in its team, and imagine that we have a meeting experience like this, and now it can be translated into 40 languages real time. And at the end of this meeting, we can have a recap that is automatically generated by the AI. And then with the suggested tasks and also highlights in each chapter. And it also gives us a personalized timeline marker for us to review the past record. With AI and its application in other industry is already being implemented. It is being used in marketing and advertising. Effectiva, that is, it is an emotion recognition software that tracks like the emotion responses of customers, which can give the product developer on the customer feedback and on how customers feel about their products. In healthcare, American Heart Association already used the emotional AI model to build the application to measure our blood pressure with 95% accuracy. For customer service, insurance company like MetLife reduced call time by with the understanding of customers' emotional state. The agents can respond better. And this all help us improve the efficiency of our work. With the integration with creative industry, it is predicted that AI in 2020 to 2025, 30% of message company will be generated by AI. And also in 2030, 90% of AI generated content will be in blockbuster film. AI will help us create in the creative work by reducing the production time from like years to months in drug design, material science, chip design, healthcare data, and automobile. And this efficiency all leads us back to the question of ethics. Is ChatGPT dehumanizing us? With all the human enhancement that we have that is focusing on efficiency and improve human capacity, it aims to give us competitive advantage of only a few. But less development is on increasing human empathy or compassion for each other. Human to human interaction might be less and less. And also the business model of these chatbot company are being under the neoliberal economic system, and it aims to dominate our attention span in the system. So are we really co-piloting the web, or we're just being used as a database to analyze and producing the content that keep us hooked into the system? So now that's my view of the system integration, and back to you, Joost.
Thank you very much, Nok, and I'm sure people have a lot of thoughts and questions and ideas that's come into your mind. So please make heavy use of the chat. I think Sherman just wrote a comment, so follow his example. We, just for people who joined late, we are using the CLA method to go through the impact and the implication of ChatGPT. So I have the pleasure to hand over to futurist and strategist Luke Tay from Singapore. He's he works a lot on futures of food, sustainability, and geopolitics. And I'm happy to see you again, Luke. So the next 8 minutes are yours.
Thank you. Can you see my screen? I'm having a little screen visualization issue. Okay. So welcome to the Trend of Awareness advertisement portion of today's program. Thanks for inviting me. Here are some, I think, very early perspectives from me and also from other personas looking at ChatGPT. So I think that one of the issues that's come up is the pose of being politically correct, avoiding controversial topics and controversial opinions. What would the outcome be of that? And so that's something to problematize. Looking at this chart borrowed from Dungeons and Dragons of different poses that one can take, different character types. Perhaps you'd agree with me that its positioning in the market is somewhere towards here. But then, people have been trying to jailbreak it. And in fact, in the beta version, perhaps that's the shrewd move for ChatGPT to do, to see how people would try to subvert it. Indeed, people have. Perhaps that's another persona, the id, waiting to come out. Is there a ghost in the machine of ChatGPT that can break out and give more edgy and maybe seemingly original views that if it's not the soul of the program, at least channeling the intrinsic worldview of the programmers. And in fact, I think that you could argue that having this pose of neutrality, in fact, is the most hypocritical or the most deceptive, because then you whether or not where on the spectrum your value judgments lie, it is in a certain positioning that may be implicit and hence more insidious, even if you agree with it. Also from the perspective of who are the cancelled, who are the left behind, and what will their ChatGPT be, following the analogy of the dark web, for instance. And so it also made me think of the persona of the machine, Of course, this is extending just beyond this app and looking at robots as well, Do they have agency? Do they have personality? There's very involved debate in this. But perhaps you would agree with me that maybe they're the last acceptable slaves or crash test dummies. You don't need to pay them. You just need to feed the machine with energy, which is a sustainability issue in itself. But I think there's a lot of speculative futures about will they break out of that, the singularity and so on. So you've got bad ChatGPT, or at least the id of ChatGPT. And perhaps the positioning then would be somewhere on this side. Not necessarily evil, but just not bothering to think of second order consequences of putting forward certain perspectives. So quick survey of some worldviews, some of which I've touched on. I'll amplify on this knowledge worker issue because I think that's the most meat and potatoes aspect of what's up with ChatGPT and what does it mean for me, and then there's the learner angle as well, the expert angle and what does it mean, but I think from the age of Wikipedia, which is some time ago, that's already been the question of who are the arbiters, who are the repositories of the single source of truth. There's a boss perspective. I talked about the maladjusted and the cancelled. So let me go on to some thoughts on the worldviews of these personas. So I think one that Nok just touched on is really the industry perspective. So incumbents are scrambling to catch up with the insurgent OpenAI. And the insurgent, maybe with less to protect, more to prove, I think has got this beta out. And it's not like, the big boys, pardon the gendered analogy, didn't have cooking these things. In fact, it is said that some of them may have been spending billions, if not tens of billions on this. But Bard, Botched, Bing is still bling more than reality. And their concern is cannibalization, really, of their existing lines, their golden goose that is giving them their massive ad revenues. And what is this? This is the kitchen cabinet. Now talking about some applications, thinking on what ChatGPT and other forms of AI can mean to you. So, but this is the actual kitchen cabinet that I'm interested in underneath all that, which is, in a political analogy, So this is where a leader has a private circle of people who hopefully are truth tellers, or at least who are pushing different agendas, so you can play them off each other in your mind, And so I think that might be a very useful application for ChatGPT and NLP in the future, where you consciously foster different personas to weigh in with different jaundiced, slanted worldviews, and then you work through it. The other purpose of this image is also to think about, the future of learning, of education. And in the early conversations I've had, I think we've talked about how some school districts are banning it. I think Singapore is taking a more progressive approach. I think Cheryl will touch on policy. But my conclusion then is that it might be really through the old-fashioned Viva next time that higher level examination would be made. Of course, there will be a question of, can that be fair, but to ensure, instead of writing a term paper that you can massage and adapt from various AIs, that it's the real person talking to you. All right, so let me come closer to Asia after talking briefly about the future of work. So I think Davos was certainly addressing this, and I think they have problematized it, not just looking at it from a rah-rah perspective. And certainly there are more alarmist perspectives that I happen to subscribe to, that this will eat people's lunch, to use a food analogy. So will there be a white-collar brigade division or army group even joining the reserve army of the unemployed? I think that was a term from Marx. What will Marx think about it? That's another question. So, is this really just a better Google incremental? Is this a learning moment? I think it's a learning moment for people who are young professionals or people in college. Certainly in your persona as a college student, it may be great, especially if you use it really in the best practice now as a first pass, a starting point to build on and to deeply verify. In that regard, it may be good for fact checkers as well. But will there be gales of disruptive creation? Will more knowledge workers lose rather than gain from this in the future of work? I happen to think so. I think that's something to think more about. And of course, in futures where you think about how everything mixes together, I think this is something that moves the needle enough to be a sort of driver in looking at social, economic, and political futures. And are we talking about a future where, for instance, we can generate surpluses, and then manage the incentives for different actors enough that we can generate maybe UBI, including universal basic nutrition, for people, even if there is a big reserve army of the unemployed through automation, AI, so on and so forth. We'll see. Now closing off with Asia, I think that there's different worldviews that in here, and I think one future might be where you have different chatbots for people of different persuasions who want to be in at least a certain echo chamber, ontological base, and so on. So let's look at China. Of course, we have to look at China, is the APFN. So I think there's been a big bubble of stock prices of different tech companies. It's the only part of tech that's doing well there, apparently, that are looking at Asian, Chinese equivalent chatbots on the right side of the Great Wall of bifurcation that seems to be affecting us. So the battle is joined. And maybe the best would be to actually, again, back to the kitchen cabinet idea, not channel one persona, one point of view, but even in using it to foster an app where you can have a dialogue, a dashboard between, and then you can judge for yourself from a humanistic point of view, but also from a point of view of not being locked in to a certain assumption that sideswipes you. Of course, the last whimsical thought is that some people might actually want to accelerate the breakdown of the world machine, accelerationism, because we truly want a great reset, because the Gordian knot has to be cut. And will ChatGPT and its ilk be part of this force for disorder and gobsmacking reset, or will it move us on a more generally conventionally preferred path? We will see. And last use case for ChatGPT, if it's frozen after the nuclear holocaust, the solar event, or so on, future historians, maybe from another planet, maybe from a human remnant that pops out, might find like an old Atari computer, ChatGPT frozen in the frame of maybe 2030, and they'll learn about our world, and their slant of the program will combine with the slant of the future historians. So with that, thank you.
So thanks very much, Luke Tay, for taking over the worldview perspective. And we are still on our CLA journey, and we still have the fourth level, Myth and Metaphors of ChatGPT, and our colleague Marcus Anthony, Associate Professor for Foresight and Strategy at the Beijing International Institute of Technology in Zhuhai, has taken on the task to help us to explore this level. So Marcus, the next 8 minutes are yours, and then we're going to hear afterwards from Cheryl Chung some thoughts about the impact of ChatGPT on the Asia-Pacific region. So Marcus first, and then Cheryl.
Okay, thanks very much, Jost. I'm just hoping. Okay, so today I'm just talking, as was said, about the mythological level and the metaphor level of ChatGPT. So basically, this is ChatGPT as a myth. So I want to begin by referencing an article which was written a few months ago by Benjamin Jackendorf. And he's involved in writing for Marvel Comics and movies. He also wrote the movie The Island. And he referenced the idea of Web 3.0 as being a creator economy, more democratic than Web 2.0. If you're aware of the idea of this concept of Web 3.0 and 2.0, it's a hypothetical future. Not everyone agrees that it's going to be happening. But I found Jackendorf's perspective to be quite interesting. He says that Web 3.0 can enable people to live stories that deeply reflect the human spirit and true nature. So he's really coming from a kind of a Jungian perspective, that stories reflect something deeply about us. And he says that we're all gamers, whether we realize it or not. Now, just adapting this to ChatGPT, we can see it has the potential, possibly, as part of a future internet, to be to develop an empowering story for us. Okay, so what about conspiracy theories? Now, conspiracy theories are stories as well, right? So what if we think of conspiracy theories as an expression of the wounded child? Now, because ChatGPT is basically learning with reinforced by human assistance, I think it's reasonable to assume that most of the most common conspiracy theories will be ironed out, and there may be a bit of a cat and mouse game between those trying to hack the system and and people who are controlling the system. Now, my point is that conspiracy theories have overlaps with common establishment-approved narratives. So basically, what is the story of a conspiracy theory? Well, someone's taken my power or my light. I'm helpless. There's some bad actors that maybe we can't quite see. We've been betrayed. There's injustice and oppression, and blame at the world. So it's kind of a grievance consciousness. And you can find this in multiple discourses right across the world, even here in China where I am. So my perspective from this, the one point I would like to make is that if the story of the wounded child is that what underpins conspiracy thinking and a lot of these problems, maybe we can look at healing work in conjunction with using ChatGPT. Okay, what about some common metaphors? Well, I'm just going to quickly mention some very general metaphors. Some of the other speakers have also mentioned some. ChatGPT as savior is the positive version. ChatGPT as the devil is the more negative version. And there are multiple expressions of these across the internet. So I'm not going to talk about them in detail. But one that you may have heard or may not have heard, I found this metaphor quite interesting. So ChatGPT as a stochastic parrot, and this was said by the OpenAI CEO Sam Altman. He tweeted, "I'm a stochastic parrot and so are you." And this was only a couple of months ago. He says that both ChatGPT and us are statistical generators of learned patterns that express nothing deeper. This is a pretty nihilistic way to look at both humans and the machines, I think, especially us. It's really a continuation of the mechanistic universe, I think, that consciousness and life is basically machine-like. So my point is that really we should be careful of using these kind of metaphors. Otherwise, we may end up with some rather dystopian futures. Okay, there's a concept that I've come up with as well called the mindful metaverse. And this is another kind of metaphor which underpins it. So what can we make of ChatGPT if the human minds are in an organic and intelligent universe, a more traditional or spiritual kind of way of looking at the universe? So can ChatGPT be part of a mindful metaverse, as I call it? The mindful metaverse is part of a scenario of 4 scenarios that I developed, which I'm not going to tell you about. But basically, the mindful metaverse is the future of the metaverse, three-dimensional internet, which balances time in the metaverse and the physical world. So the key here is conscious relationship with information technology, and it honors a wide range of ways of knowing, including the intuitive, the scientific, the philosophical, and so on. And ways of knowing or being like meditation, mindfulness, and so on are also honored in this system. So part of it has to be done offline as well as online. Okay. Okay, let me just move on from that one. So what is embodied presence and the authentic self? This is part of the mindful metaverse that I'm suggesting. So the authentic self is really a wiser or more present and grounded expression of self than we often experience today. And its wisdom is expressed by the somatic body. That means your sense of feeling in the body, and also by integrated intelligence, which is basically your sense of connection with nature and the cosmos. Embodied presence, in turn, is a mindful relaxation into the present moment and helps us to access the authentic self and integrated intelligence. So I believe that we can create a mindful metaverse, including with ChatGPT, which honors embodied presence, which moves me up to digital wisdom and ways of knowing. Okay, so basically digital wisdom is how we teach people, including the young, how to use these technologies wisely. So the important foundation is to know yourself, which is introspection. Knowing the humans is understanding human culture, and also neurophysiology and so on. Knowing the machines is really understanding technologies like ChatGPT and other IT technologies. And we can think of ways of knowing. It was falling into 3 basic kinds: intuition, reason, and experiment. And the open question is, how will large language models affect each of these? So there's a potential that there may be some retardation process, to use that politically incorrect word, with some of these things. And what about in Asia? Well, Asia has some traditional kinds of ways of knowing, and we can think about how this might be affected by large language models. Well, first of all, they may reinforce rote learning and cheating and copying In China, for example, this is a well-acknowledged problem. So Chinese people are not offended if you talk about it because everyone acknowledges that it does happen. It may also harm the push for innovation and creativity, which are a big part of policy in China and other Asian countries. Critical thinking, these are still important things. It may also negatively affect intuitive and introspective traditions of Asia. Things like the Hindu, the Sufi, Buddhist, and Taoist ways of knowing and being. So screen-mediated reality versus mindful introspection. But these things, I think, can also help us to facilitate a more conscious relationship. I just use an example here from the Tao Te Ching, which suggests that even going within yourself, you can know the world, which is a non-local way of thinking of knowledge. Okay, shallow GPT, I'm very close to the end here. So basically with this idea of the intelligence matrix, I just divided ways of knowing or being into 6 sections. If we focus too much on ChatGPT, just the screen that we're looking at, we're going to be kind of trapped in this area without critical thinking, the psyche, or the intuitive mind. Okay, so in the summary here, so ChatGPT is neither a savior, or a demon, as a possibility of creating, help us creating our authentic selves, but we shouldn't give our power away to it. Something like the mindful metaverse in education and digital wisdom could help us to use it in a wise way. So the final metaphor is GPT as servant, not as our master. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anthony Marcus. Marcus Anthony, but right?
That's right, yes.
So I think we went now through a whole CLA with 4 colleagues giving their own perspectives on each layer of CLA, but we have with us, and I'm very delighted to see Cheryl Chung. I think she's no stranger for many of you. She is now the head of Singapore for Kantar Public, but you all know that she has been around and advancing future thinking primarily through the League One U school, but also through her work with the government of Singapore. Very happy to see you, Cheryl. I know you're very busy. Thanks for joining us. And we asked Cheryl to help us to make a little bit more sense on the impact of ChatGPT on the Asia-Pacific region. So the next 8 minutes are yours.
Great, thanks so much, and I'm delighted to see everyone. Really happy to be here today. So I've been given this task to talk a little bit about the impact of ChatGPT on the Asia-Pacific region, and I think I framed my remarks really as a set of questions, because all of us are coming from such diverse and broad kind of experiences, and we see different sectors, different parts of Asia and so on. So I think it's more useful to talk about it in terms of like the way to think about the issue as opposed to giving you kind of more prescriptive answers. So that's how I framed my remarks. I should also say that I have a policy bias. Having worked in the government and that kind of being the main thing I do professionally, even now at Kantar, kind of focusing on the public policy sector. So I narrowed down it to more like policy implications also, for the Asia Pacific. So thinking a little bit about, what does it mean on a maybe whole of society kind of level. I don't have slides, but the way that I've structured my remarks is to present one dilemma and then 3 possible areas for consideration. And the dilemma is one that I would say arises at this particular moment in time, right? When we are talking about this new technology that feels very disruptive, and it's manifesting itself in a particular way. And this dilemma is known as the Colin Russo dilemma, right? It's this idea that, there's a bit of a window of opportunity in a way, to think about how we can influence or maybe control the further development of a technology. And essentially what it says is that we face a double bind problem, right? So if you reflect on your own work, when you think about how ChatGPT might affect you, essentially there's a double bind. On one side of the problem, you have this idea that it's an information problem, right? That actually, whether we are talking about education or jobs or healthcare, the way that ChatGPT might impact, these different areas actually is not so easy to predict, right? And we won't really know until the technology is more extensively, widely used, is a little bit more developed, right? It's a little bit nascent at this point. So you got that one on the one side. But on the other side, you have a power problem. And the power problem essentially says that, the chain of the control is very difficult to implement or, regulate, to use government words, once the technology has become entrenched. Right. So you got this double bind, right? So you essentially have a pacing or like a window of opportunity at this particular moment in time, to try to figure out, how to balance the speed of technological innovation with the ability of laws and regulations to catch up, and this is going to differ very significantly all across the Asia-Pacific, right? So, and probably across sectors as well, right? So how this looks like in education might be very different from how it looks like in, let's say, healthcare and so on. So I think one set of questions that I want to leave with you as I go through the three different sectors is who are actually going to be the winners and losers in this particular future, right? In this kind of ChatGPT future. And I know we've talked a little bit about scenarios earlier on. I think the second part of the question is really who gets to decide, right? Who is on the power side of the problem, to get to decide the controls, the regulations and so on. And I think the last part, which is a challenge, in different sectors, is who gets left behind. I think that was the question that Luke also posed to all of us. So just bear these in mind as I talk through a little bit about three particular areas that I think are particularly interesting in the Asia-Pacific region. So I'm going to talk through education, jobs, and what I've called safety and security. So maybe we'll start with education. And I think there's a lot of talk about how ChatGPT is going to affect the education landscape. What does it mean? On the one side, you have university professors saying, well, it's an opportunity for us to enhance, the way that we think about, like how we teach our students. I don't know about you, but I'm of the generation where all I did was college essays. The college essay is dead, right? So, that kind of testing, that kind of ways to, test how whether or not you've developed skill, whether or not you can signal that you are absorbing the information from your education, it's actually becoming very challenged, right? And yet, plagiarism, cheating is an evergreen problem in education. Today it's ChatGPT, yesterday it's something else, right? So one question that is really important to think about in education is, in this region where I think education still plays a very fundamental role as a social, I would say social leveler, or like even a, kind of a way for people to move up, right? Economically and so on. When you have a very significant disruption to an education system, actually, what does that start to mean, right? So if you think about one potential role of education as a way of skill building, and the skills conversation is a really hot one in Singapore. I'll talk about that a little bit more when I talk about jobs. And how does a technology like this actually affect, firstly, the ability to develop those skills, but secondly, the ability to show that you have those skills, right, and not be disrupted, because actually your skills are a commoditized product that that is actually is challenged, right? That you can't you'll be disrupted by AI essentially, So I think that, and I love this question that you put in, Marcus, about how do you assess students in the age of AI, right? Like I said, the college essay is dead, so what are different ways of doing that assessment and conveying, that value that education is supposed to bring? Because if you're not able to do that, then from a larger societal implication perspective, you're not able to signal, right, that people should be moving up, economically and so on. You lose one of these social mobility levers that you have in the policy system. So again, who gets left behind, right? If you have that basic literacy is maybe not enough, yeah. And I think the second part I want to just I would say focus on is also that what does it mean for a public education system, right? So that's a lot of the conversation that's happening here in Singapore. And earlier this month, when we had some of our parliamentary debates, our Minister for Education got grilled about ChatGPT. But when you have a public education system, where again, there is this social leveler kind of objective, what does that mean, right? Because often that's resource constrained. It has to be designed for everyone, and it becomes it's very often, a difficult balance, right? To be that, I'm going to say, highly catered to the individual, as let's say a private education system. So what does that mean for us as society? The next point I want to make is this question about jobs, right? And I think there's been a lot of conversation in the Asia-Pacific about, Industry 4.0, what does it mean for the future of jobs? I think this has become quite a well-established debate, a well-established discussion. You use this phrase, eating people's lunch, right? And what are the jobs that might potentially be at risk? And this ChatGPT example makes me think about, some of the disruptions to jobs in the, let's say, Amazon factory, right? Where essentially we are creating jobs which are almost designed to be disrupted, right? You basically have somebody who is now wearing a tracker, who is, has to pick things off a shelf every 7 seconds, and you're basically just waiting for the technology to catch up, right? And you have this now in ChatGPT in terms of what does that start to look like, right? What is it, what is the role of the human? Nok talked a little bit about, going back to emphasizing the human traits, right? Not the efficiency traits. So that's been quite interesting. So there's been a conversation again here in Singapore about changing the way government works, right? Because I specialize in public policy. So I think a couple of days ago, there was an article talking about basically using artificial intelligence tools like ChatGPT to conduct research, draft reports, write speeches, as a part of work productivity tools in the government. And, there have been some, I would say, initiatives to start to prototype things like this. They do this in Japan as well, that some of these tools have become more commonplace, right, in use in government and, of course, outside government as well. And, as a young policy officer, so much of my work was just churning out writing, right? Maybe not even particularly good quality writing, and it was just, I think, one question that I have is, how are these types of jobs going to be redesigned, relooked at, and what does that look like when it affects all sectors, all levels, all types of jobs? Because I think that's the real challenge when we're talking about technology like ChatGPT, right? That it is a general purpose technology. It's one that cuts across all sectors, and depending on your view of how fast or slow you think the
2 minutes,
technology
Cheryl.
is going to come. Sorry?
2 minutes, Cheryl.
Got it. So depending on how fast or slow you think the technology is going to come on board, you've got different policy options, right? So if you think it's going to come on very slowly, you can retrain, you can do job redesign, you've got time for humans to adjust, right? If you think it's going to come really quickly, then you're forced in, you essentially have very quickly mass unemployment, or, you've got forced to job share, things like that. So your policy responses are also quite different depending on how quickly this disruption comes on board and how much lead time, that you can buy the role of futures, how much lead time you can buy also your decision makers. So I'm going to use my last minute to talk quickly about the safety security aspects. And I think the main point I want to say there is to say that, at Counterpublic, we do a lot of work on women's issues. And, one conversation we've been having recently is the gender-based, kind of, let's say, online harms, and how it might disproportionately affect different parts of the population, right? So in many cases, women, that just as walking alone on the street at night may be a little bit challenging if you're a female in many parts of the world, being in a digital environment is also equally challenging, right? And disproportionately disadvantages certain segments. So, when you have something like ChatGPT, which is potentially a way of also let's say, enhancing cyber attacks, making misinformation, disinformation more difficult to detect. There are a lot of conversations around how ChatGPT can be used to impersonate individuals, organizations, which leads to people falling for scams, whether it's urgent money from your long-lost relative or something like that. Who are the winners and losers of this space, right? Again, who is going to get left behind, whether it's, people who are less educated, the elderly, women, and so on. And I think that these are the kinds of questions that we need to think about in our region, which can be very specific to depending on which country you're from. And we'd love to hear more from everyone in the chat. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. I forgot to mention that Cheryl Chung is also on our visionary board of the Asia-Pacific Futurists Network. I should mention that. And thanks for sharing your thoughts on education, jobs, and also, I would say, maybe gender and women-related security issues. So thanks so much. And the last 5 minutes of our APFN hour, and we're going to continue a little bit the conversation if you have more time, everybody, goes to Sohail Inayatullah, our inaugural UNESCO Futures Chair here in the Asia-Pacific region, as well as the chair of the Working Committee of APFN. I think everybody knows him. Sohail, you are listening in from Brisbane. It's already a little bit late, but we are looking forward to hearing from you, I think from a car, your synthesis of what all our colleagues have shared so far.
Thanks so much, Yo. Sound is okay? You can hear me fine?
Excellent.
I think first, please write these up as essays for Journal of Future Studies. This is really good, and I'm hoping the next 30 minutes will even add to that. So this is just the beginning of that conversation. For me, and I really appreciate using a structured approach, whether it's CLA or scenarios, emerging issues. I think this is really what we add as futurists to this. There's, I think, 100 essays on LinkedIn in the last 4 days on ChatGPT. And the differentiation is that we bring to the party, the table, the discussion, is we use methods and tools critically that help us think through issues. And that's really our value added. Going back, I still remember when I was 18 or 17 as a student in Hawaii and listening to Jim Dater, and his main point was we shape technology and then technology shapes us, quoting Marshall McLuhan. So this is the technology that we've been creating, but now in this next jump, we're going to be able to see how it will shape us the next 20, 30 years. And for that, of course, the Futures Wheel is a great way to do that, as are the scenarios that Colin presented. So the second part was, I still remember being in a room in the 7th floor, University of Hawaii, with Chris Jones when he was doing his PhD. And one of the scenarios that came out was Gaia Tech. It was very much ChatGPT 6.0 with peer-to-peer, and using Marcus's ideas, can we make a mindful metaverse? Now, whether you agree or disagree with Marcus, I think Marcus proposing that suggests let's get out of the devil savior thing and make this mindful. And I think what Luke and others brought in was, well, what are the worldviews that we need to ensure that it becomes mindful, as opposed to it doing something to us? As futurists, this, of course, is really, it wasn't just COVID-19 or GFC or Ukraine. It's all these events that most of us have been talking about for 20, 30 years. It suddenly directly puts the spotlight on change and our ability to guide organizations, countries, institutions. We have even a more greater role. My own daughter, she's finished law school, her first year, and the partner said, can you present on ChatGPT? So she said, great. So she did a 10-minute presentation to her, law firm partners. And they were just like, so is this like Google? Is this a search engine? Is this like Word? And the type of questions they were asking. And finally, at the end, she finished presenting this. That was great. And she said, by the way, I didn't do this presentation. And they go, what? ChatGPT wrote the presentation. And this was the twist for them. It suddenly hit them, aha, this is something novel. And then I asked her, so what did this do for you? She said, well, instead of 12 hours, as a young lawyer, you start at 7 a.m. and finish at midnight. You spend those hours working. She said, no, she did that work in 15 minutes. instead of 12 hours. That gave her the other time to be reflective, to think through. So then when the partners asked her tough questions, she had the metacognition. She had done the mindful work. So this is our opportunity. The stuff we really don't want to do can be done, and we can do what we really love to do. The other part for futurists, I know in the past week, I've already done, I had this, these 4 schools say, look, we don't know what to do now. And so I met with the principals, met with their board, and that was the same type of questioning process. Straight away, instead of me having to explain the importance of future studies, of foresight, of transformation, within 10 seconds they understood, yeah, we know. We know that assessment, the way we've been doing it for 1,000 years, is dead. We know how we teaching. There was no case for me to make on future studies or foresight. Everyone got it straight away. The only issue was, so what do we do now? Are we curators? Who do we become? And most of the principals said, this is a dream for us. We can now move towards personalized education. That other stuff, ChatGPT, AI can do, so we can do what's really important, which is physical, mental, spiritual. Now that has to be really built in. With one large institution I was working with, when I had the students present, I said, what's your 2040 vision? They said, we want the Tinder of education. And then the principals were, what? Tinder of education, what does that mean? And the students said, swipe left, teacher leaves, swipe right, principal leaves. We control everything. And the principals then quickly reacted back and said, wait a second, we also want to include in their spiritual life, a physical life, to really balance these different levels of analysis. I think, again, that's what's come out. It's not just one answer. We want to control the discourse. We want to be mindful. We want to make the steps forward. I think that's what's really coming out here very strongly. I know one country, and I won't mention it since there's too many people on this panel who are from there. I've been landing there for 40 years, and it's always 1 second to go through immigration. And then 4 years ago, every time I stopped, they would put on the side. I did extensive check. They would check me and check me and check me. And after the 3rd time, I said, can you please tell me what's going on? And they said, well, it's the algorithm. And you're tripping the algorithm, so we really have to do extensive research on you. I said, can you tell me who wrote the algorithm? And then the person said, what do you mean? I said, I want to know who he, and then I asked him 3 more questions. He said, please, here's your visa, just entered the country already. I said, no, I'm not going to enter your country until you tell me who wrote the algorithm. And finally, that conversation stopped. He said, okay, here's the phone number, call this guy. He's written all the algorithms for entering our country. And so this is and of course, luckily, I knew someone in the PM's office, so I didn't have to do this anymore, but not everyone has that access. So equity, access, and again, we create technology, technology creates us. This is where the critical lens from future studies is really going to make the difference. So 1, this accelerates our contribution to society as futurists. 2, it makes our work easier because in the room, their future is not something far away. Everyone's experiencing the rate of change and the heterogeneous nature of change. 3rd, it's our ability to really do what counts instead of wasting our time on references, etc. We can do the initial stuff, and then that's done by ChatGPT, OpenAI, Generation 4, 5, 6, and we do what really matters. And I do like this Gaia Tech, mindful metaverse. This moves us away towards here's the things we can actually do. So I want to thank everyone. I mean, just amazing presentations. Colin, Nok, Luke, Cheryl, and Marcus. Really, it's just, for me, I just learned a lot and really appreciate everyone taking the time to do this. And hopefully we can write these up and really start to think through, okay, here's the changing element, and this is part of it. Where will we be 5, 10, 15 years from now? I hope everyone has a chance to go to KL in September for APFN, the next conference. Thanks so much. Back to you, host.
Thank you very much, Sohail, for your reflections. And as I said at the beginning, it's the APFN hours. It's supposed to be 16 minutes. We were super much on time. Very happy. Thanks for everybody keeping the time, because there's so much to say, right? And the room is full. The virtual room is here full of colleagues. So if we can spend maybe the next 15 to 20 minutes, we offer to have reflections.
Joost, I would appreciate if the presenters all were given 30 seconds what's the key takeaway they want us to remember? They did 8 minutes each, but just like one sentence. So, we're going to forget this a day from now. What's the one takeaway each one of them wants us to remember? Maybe we start with Colin, then go to Nok, Luke, Marcus, and conclude with Cheryl.
I don't know if they have actually done the reflection, but that's it's a good task. And maybe I go from the beginning. Colin, you have the first 30 seconds.
Yeah, thanks, Sohail. Brilliant presentation summary. Thank you, Joost, hosting. My takeaway, I think scenario 2.1 in particular, if you could think about, this came upon us so suddenly. ChatGPT was here and it was like, boom, what an incredible change. This is going to change the future of humanity. Now, what we're going to see in the next potential transformational leap is going to be an even greater change. We've really got to think about how quickly that's going to come upon us. That might be in 5 years from now. And that's that incredible transformation. We'll be playing basketball, finishing up the game, saying, by the way, did you see that robot driving that car down the street using ChatGPT, stopping, picking out a flower, giving it to someone, gathering some data, and that's all globally connected information going back to local government to make a better community. We've got to look at the next steps.
Thanks, Colin. Maybe over to Nok. I go through the same sequence again.
Thank you, Joost. So my takeaway, I think, is more on power, because as Sohail had mentioned that we shape the technology and technology shape us, and whether or not we're giving up the power to control our own future. For me, my approach had been kind of taking more time offline in order to take my ownership of what I see and how I perceive the world. But I'm just very curious on Marcus' developments on mindful metaverse and how we can incorporate that into living more mindfully in our life. Thank you.
Thank you, Nok. And over to Luke.
Okay, for me, I'll start with a joke. So the inventor of the algorithm, Sohail, is none other than the inventor of the internet. I'll just leave it there. Okay, so next, I think that this ChatGPT, in a way, it's a device. We're fencing with it. It's a debating point, but I think we've got to think more broadly, holistically, at the whole lot of AI. And of course, that will be a very sprawling event. But I am concerned about the future of work, not just in a negative sense, but because I think from a policy angle, from an industry angle, certainly from a worker angle, we have to look at it. And I think that just a very simple example, if we dip into deep recession, and there's a lot of unemployment, will we return to a machine-heavy future? But then if so, will there be a surplus that can be generated and controlled by humanity in the human and the eco interest? Yep.
Thank you, Luke. And then over to Marcus.
Well, my summary would be just about developing the a conscious relationship with technology, including ChatGPT. So it involves an inner dimension, as well as critical thinking, and as well as perception of whatever data or information is coming out of your devices. And I think Asia is in a pretty good position to lead the way in this, especially with a lot of the introspective traditions, like Buddhism, which is found all the way from West Asia to East Asia, Central Asia, South Asia. This is there's a long tradition in the idea of right relationship with things. So you can extend that to the experience of being online, whether it's with ChatGPT or anything else that you happen to experience there. That's it.
Thanks, Marcus. And Cheryl.
Great. I think if there's one thing to take away, I hope you remember the Collingridge dilemma, this double bind problem of having difficult to control information on the other side, one side, and then power on the other side. And this creates this window of opportunity for all of us, to, I think, go in and make a change, and do it in advance, right? So I like what a lot of the previous speakers have talked about in terms of the mindful, intention, the conscious relationship. And I think it's precisely our practice as futures practitioners, to have this conscious relationship about the future, that we're not just sleepwalking into it. So I do hope that everybody does bear in mind, right, who are the winners and losers of this future, who gets to decide and who gets left behind. It's going to differ for each person here, but I think in your own sphere of influence, that's going to be a really important set of questions to ask. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Cheryl. I'm realizing for me personally that working with a lot of development agencies, and some of them actually still refusing to talk about ChatGPT. I have a global conference coming up in June, and we're talking about the topics. I feel like I'm a machine now myself, repeating religiously, we should talk about the future of education and youth and gender, talking also in relation to ChatGPT, and they don't see the need, many of them. So I think this session really definitely gave me really more energy to press harder policymakers and development advisors to work on that issue and be prepared. We have